Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I want to apologize for any funky sounds and weird audio. I think my microphone has bit the dust. Some of you have affectionately called it the watermelon microphone. I really love it. It's a really cute microphone. But I was recording yesterday, and like 3 minutes in, everything was fine, and then 3 minutes in, it like just stopped, and I don't know how to fix that. So I'm gonna try to get another one. But for the time being, I just kind of have to work with what I got. So that's what I am doing right now. So again, I apologize for any weird sounds. It's just learning how to do this YouTube stuff is a work in progress. Okay, so today I want to talk about an essay I published on Substack. And yeah, this is still kind of following along the course of events from the past week. Charlie Kirk's death was a major watershed moment in American politics, and I don't think I think people understand it, but I think a lot of people, myself included, are trying to figure out, well, where do we go from here? I've heard some other commentators say this, and I agree, and I feel very much the same way. His death was shocking. I was one of those unfortunate people who logged on to X moments after it happened, and that was the first video um, that was in my feed, and I didn't want to watch it, and unfortunately, kind of did. Um, and so like the shock of it, I think was startling enough. I think anyone who saw that video knew immediately the gravity of the situation, right? So that the immediate aftermath of the assassination, obviously the announcement of his death, the shock that came with that was awful. But I think the after effects of what transpired over, the next, 48, 72 hours, I think was even more startling. Like the fact that so many Americans celebrated his death, wished death upon his wife, wished suffering upon his two young children, both under the age of 5. I mean, it's demonic. It's incredible that people think that is okay. And so, for the first time in American history, we watched an assassination unfold live for the entire world to see in 4K. Like everything transpired live. And then you saw people come out of the woodwork who, like teachers and firefighters and nurses, people who are in like critical positions within your local community, come out of the woodwork and celebrate it. And I think instantaneously, any rational person knew, oh my God, that person wishes to cause me harm, right? And I think that's a reasonable concern. If you go to a doctor and that person has certain ideological beliefs, there is reason to be concerned. Like, a really good example is obviously in the medical profession. If you are completely dependent on someone, if you're incapacitated, you're in the emergency room, whatever, you are completely dependent on another human being, and that other human being, their attention is being pulled in multiple ways, right? Doctors and nurses and ERs work incredibly hard. They're overworked, to be frank. They work these long shifts. And if you're at hour 10, 11 of a 12-hour shift, you know, you might not be thinking with like your best faculties in mind. You just want to be done. So if you are in a position where you are incapacitated, you're in an emergency room, and you have a doctor that's towards the end of their shift, they just want to go home, and they have to make decisions about who to treat, how to treat, and it's, again, emergency room situation. There's the requirement to triage different patients and prioritize things. If they, let's say they see like you come in and you're wearing a MAGA shirt, for example, and they're a staunch liberal. In that situation, would they put you at the bottom of the triage list? I think that's reasonable to ask. And we have precedent for this, right? Like when Hurricane Helene hit Western North Carolina, there were members of FEMA who were instructed not to go to houses that had placards in their front yard, because remember, this was right before the election, that had placards in their front yard for Donald Trump. And there were people who were fired in FEMA because of that. So we already have precedent of people who are in positions of power at a localized level denying services to their fellow Americans because of their political beliefs. Now we have an assassination of someone who was a citizen. He wasn't a journalist. He wasn't a politician. Yes, he was an organizer. Yes, he was influential. But for all intents and purposes, he was no different than you and I, right? He was just, an average American citizen. And so if he can be assassinated, and if other Americans can deny their fellow citizens services based on their political beliefs, like, what does that say about the situation now? I think it is reasonable to assume, especially if you're in a critical role like healthcare or banking, for example. We are clearly seeing a bifurcation in society based on how people responded to this assassination. And everyone who I think was kind of in the shadows about how they really felt about conservatives and MAGA folks and anyone basically who disagrees with them, they've now come out of the woodwork. And it's like, okay, like, it's kind of like it's a permissive environment now to not only commit acts of violence against your political opponents, but to deny them services. And because of the dehumanizing language that has been in the media for much of the last decade, regarding Donald Trump and his followers, these people no longer see see you and I as humans. And Shuan had made a great point about this when she did a recording, like so many other commentators, about what happened. And she said, you can't use the logic, well, this could have been, he was a husband and father, this could have been your son, your brother, an uncle, whatever. Like, you can't use the familial connection to gain empathy. And that is in part because these people have already disconnected from their family, right? They've already cut them off. So they don't feel empathy towards their existing kin, their blood relatives. So why would they feel empathy towards another human being, another citizen of this country, of whom they don't have blood relations with, but is a father, was a husband? I think that really tells you the extent to where, like, our civil society has degraded. So a lot of the conversation happening right now on social media and the internet is really trying to get to the root of what happened. I think there's a blame game going on. You see a lot of conservative commentators, like, trying to find someone to pin the blame on this for. You have some who are, talking about the fear they feel about what to do now, because they recognize that the environment is dangerous. There, I mean, likely will be a repeat, copycat, someone else who's going to commit an act of violence against a conservative commentator. So there's definitely concern about that. Obviously, people are talking about high-profile firings. Jimmy Kimmel was removed from the air because of comments he made. Also, probably because no one watches him. Like, I think, just read the room. Like, no one watches TV anymore. So I think these big media channels are using the opportunity to cut their losses while they can. And maybe also, too, could be a part of a coordinated effort to make it seem like a First Amendment attack on the First Amendment. I don't know. It's a bit conspiratorial, but possibly. Regardless, like, the conversation now is not really productive. In my opinion, like, I enjoy a good conspiracy theory here and there. Yeah, I'm glad people are being held accountable. I've seen people talk about how we're in consequence culture now, and I'm totally here for it. But regardless of that, I think we need to have a plan moving forward. We need to start thinking more constructively, like, where do we go from here? And I think we need to think about this on an individual level, because this is where we're being affected the most, right? The people who are celebrating Charlie Kirk's assassination, who are wishing ill upon his wife and his children, those are people you interact with on a daily basis, right? It's not, journalists, it's not comedians, it's not the president of the United States, it's doctors and teachers and people who work at businesses. It's people you have to interact with on a daily basis. So if you do not feel safe anymore going out to dinner, going to get medical care, sending your kids to school, like that's a real problem, and that's a real deterioration of civil society. So we need to figure out how to fix that. We need to figure out not necessarily how to come back together. I echo the sentiments that Vice President Vance said when he hosted the Charlie Kirk show last week. You can't unify with these people. You can't unify with and unite with leftist ideology, because the values underpinning it are anti-American values. They are values that are nihilistic, destructive, anti-family, anti-birth, anti-life, frankly. Like, we live in an environment where death and murder is permissible. And that's a fundamental problem. Like, you cannot coexist. Two societies cannot coexist where one creates a justification for murder and the other says it's wrong, right? You just you can't coexist in that environment, because the rule of law changes. The meaning of the rule of law, how it's applied, who it's applied to, and obviously you can change the goalposts of death itself. Okay, today, Charlie Kirk's permissible. Okay, well, tomorrow, what's tomorrow look like? Who's next on the chopping block? Can you go after, like, your local city council? And again, like, people like you and I, if we have identifiers that signal that we are of a more right-leaning conservative persuasion, are we fair game? So it's a really important question to ask. We need to have absolutist and objective moral values. We have to either say murder is wrong and a court of law is where that is going to be adjudicated, or vigilante justice is permissible and you can kill anyone who you think is a threat to you, and the interpretation of a threat is highly subjective based on your worldview. Like, it's an either or. You can't have those two scenarios coexist. So we need to figure out how to move on from here, and I think the best way to move on from here is to isolate and neutralize leftist ideology. So when I say that, I'm not talking about Democrats, and I'm not necessarily talking about the left, even though it's usually framed that way. I'm specifically talking about an ideology and the adherents of that ideology. An ideology that is anti-life, anti-family, anti-American, anti-capitalist, very much seated in destruction, right? Pro-anarchy, like everything that is against the values that represent America. I think we need to nip that in the bud and neutralize it. And one of the problems we're facing is that for the better part of the last decade, that ideology has been rewarded. And I think that's why so many people are following it, because it's been rewarded, while conservative ideology or any other ideology or anyone who questions the leftist ideology has been punished. And good examples of this, so for example, DEI. DEI is an example of a policy that reflects leftist ideology, and that those people, DEI, has been privileged over the last decade. You've seen people gain positions of power within companies, promotions, jobs, who are not qualified, who are undeserving of that status and those jobs and that power, but they've gotten it simply for playing the DEI game, right? And so those people, because that hasn't been the incentive, a lot of people have clamored onto that because they see, if I play this game, I'm going to benefit from it, right? So we have to make it a losing game. We have to get to a point where DI is no longer providing the return on investment that it once did. Conversely, you saw during the post-COVID, during immediately following COVID, that anyone who challenged the narrative was punished. So a really good example of this would be all of the people who opposed the vaccine or questioned it or rejected it. You had lots of people who, for myriad reasons, were like, no, I'm not going to take it. No, I don't want it. Some people just asked their doctors for alternative medicines. Someone who just wanted to heal naturally. You were denied that option, and you were socially stigmatized. People cut off their family members because of this. You were canceled. You were deplatformed. Again, people lost jobs. People doing commentary and who had an internet platform were canceled. And so you saw punishment if you went to the right. So on the one hand, people were rewarded for moving further to the left. And on the other hand, they were punished for questioning it and for doing anything to the right. So that has been the framework that most people have been operating in for the last decade. And so we need to change that. We need to make questioning, critical thinking, American values, not just conservative values, American values, we need to make that the winning game, where people are rewarded for that and they see a return on their investment. And we need to isolate and neutralize the leftist ideology that is inherently un-American, so people stop playing that game and it stops appealing to people. And I think the more you do that, and the more you push the extremists out, and you really isolate them, I think that's how you can get people to move, I think, back more towards the middle. And so I've come up with a 16-point plan for restoring civil society in America. I just want to walk through some of my thoughts in case you might find any of these valuable and you might think, hey, this is something I can do. This is a way I can take action in my own community, where I live, and do something positive. I think that's the most important thing right now, and that's really the call to action is people who are questioning leftist ideology or people who identify as conservatives can't continue sitting on the sidelines. I think a lot of people have sat on the sidelines because there are more important things in politics, right? Like if you have a family, you got to take care of your family. If you're building a business, you got to take care of your business. Like there's less for you to gain from politics. You don't play in politics, whereas folks on the left, especially young people, they have the most to gain from politics. Of course, if you can get a rent freeze and free groceries and this and that, you're going to participate more because there's more for you to gain. And so that's why you see a lot of that. Same with folks who are retired, right? They need to preserve what they have. So of course they're going to participate more in politics because they want to make sure they keep getting their Social Security checks and their Medicare. The rest of us in the middle, we have other things to pay attention to. So it's hard for us to participate in politics. And so I think that's why you also get the extremes who lead to more polarization because the people participating in politics aren't representative of the whole of the United States. So I think this is a call to action, not just to stand firm on your beliefs, but also to do a better job of actually participating and being a contributing member of society. So I'm going to walk through the points I have here. You can agree to disagree with some of them. I don't care. These are just what I brainstormed. So the first one I think is the most important, and that is reclaiming your agency. I think folks on the right and conservative folks tend to do this well, this idea of holding yourself accountable, being responsible, not being the victim. I think this is incredibly important, but I think it's also important that we call people out who aren't acting as their own agents, who are captured and captivated by the ideology and the individuals that represent that ideology. So in case you didn't see it, there was a clip on the Piers Morgan show, and it was between Destiny and Anna Kasparian. And basically Anna Kasparian called Destiny out because Destiny basically made the claim that if Donald Trump had not been elected, Charlie Kirk would still be alive. So blaming Donald Trump for Charlie Kirk's assassination. And then on top of that, he just could not think for himself. And Anna Kasparian called him out and said, hey, you wake up every day. You are an autonomous individual human being. You don't have to wake up and think about Donald Trump every moment of the day. You don't have to be a victim. You can act on your own. And I think that is incredibly important right now. So I think we as individuals need to demonstrate that and show others how to take accountability. I think radical accountability, extreme ownership. If you haven't read Jocko Willink's book, go read it, listen to it on audiobook. I don't care. I think we need to start taking extreme ownership and accountability for our actions, and we need to call people out in our lives who are totally encompassed by TDS and who cannot see the world outside of blaming Donald Trump for everything. I think we need to hold them accountable. And depending on where you are, that's holding your kids accountable. If you have subordinates at work, holding them accountable. But we need to practice that. We need stronger leadership. We need people to stand up and hold one another accountable. Next, I would say get involved in local politics. And this kind of goes to the accountability thing. Everyone blames Donald Trump for everything. Sure, he's divisive. I get that. At the end of the day, he doesn't affect your life as much as people think, right? There are far more people, far more political actors that do affect your life, and they're just allowed to run around carte blanche doing whatever they want. And I'm talking about people who are on your city council, on zoning boards, on school boards, judges, people in your local criminal justice system. All of these people are elected, and no one participates in local politics. Literally no one. So a really good friend of mine volunteered at her municipal elections this past summer. And I think she had a 12-hour shift, she told me. And during the entire 12-hour shift, she said 6 or 7 people had come to cast a vote. So, a town of 10, 20,000 people, 7 people came to cast a vote for their ward member. So in some cases, local officials are run without a challenger. So you just get the incumbent who stays in power. and there's no check on it. There's no, they're obviously not held accountable, right? If there's no challenge to to their um their position, they're just going to keep getting reelected, it doesn't matter. And then if no one shows up, if you have a city of 20,000 people, only 7 people show up to vote, like, again, these people are not held accountable. And this is how you get leftist activists on, your city councils, in your school boards, in your local judicial system. And we're seeing how this is becoming problematic, right? You saw in Charlotte where, the individual who murdered a white girl, a white Ukrainian, on a train, he had 14 prior offenses, right? And so the criminal justice system failed him. Well, the judge who heard his cases previously, she was elected, right? So if you're not participating in your local city government, you are allowing people like this to be on the streets. You are allowing this. If you're not voting in your participating in your school board meetings, like, this is how ideology has captured the public school system, because we, the voters, we, the taxpayers, aren't holding these people accountable. We're just letting them go. And then, showing up to school board meetings and complaining about it. But really, you have to go to the ballot box. You have to go to the ballot box. And people think local elections don't matter, but that's the thing that matters the most, because it has the greatest effect on you. So I'm not saying don't participate in federal elections or state elections. Those are important too, but you really have to get involved in local politics. Know who your local ward or city council members are. Know who your sheriff is. Know when the elections are. Know who your judges are. Go to meetings, or watch them online, or whatever. But go, because these are the people who are spending your tax dollars, and they are implementing the policies that are of leftist ideology, right? Like, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It has to be transmitted somewhere, and this is where it's happening. This is going to be controversial. You can take it or leave it. This is how I feel, though, and so this is what I'm going to share. If you have kids who are of school age, you need to pull them out of the public school system. It is clear, based on the responses to Charlie Kirk's assassination, the number of educators and teachers and professors who have been reprimanded, who have been fired, the amount of schools that have come out and made statements about that behavior. Like, it's just appalling, and it's very clear this ideology is deeply seated within the public school system. Okay, and of course you see it that you've probably seen TikTok videos of schools pushing for trans activism, schools pushing feminist ideology, schools intervening between the relationship between parents and their students. They're acting in their best interest, and in some states, like, parents have lost the rights over their students, their underage minor students. So it's very clear something insidious is happening in the public school system, and you as a parent, it is your responsibility to raise your children with the values that you think are the right values. And so if you believe in American values, if you believe in respect and meritocracy and hard work and honesty and liberty and freedom and property rights, you need to pull your kids out of a public school system that is indoctrinating them. Because out of a 24-hour day, your kids are sleeping 8 hours. They're probably spending another, 8 hours in the public school system. Okay, that's 16 hours. So you have 8 hours left. Okay, so of that time, it's pretty much split up between getting ready in the morning. If they have after school activities, they're busy doing that. And then, like, you're exhausted after a day of work. So you have less control over the values that are being instilled in your kids than you think, because you're outsourcing their education to the public school system. And so whatever the state wants, the state is going to get. And if the state is filled and the public sector is filled with a bunch of leftist ideologues, that's what they're going to produce. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing right now. And that's why Charlie Kirk was so important, because he was effective. He was trying to stop the radicalization, or at least challenge the radicalization as it was happening. He was trying to create a counter narrative on college campuses. And the thing that's really important about this, and why this matters, is because, yeah, your kids may be 10 or 12 years old today, right? They may be young, but in 20 years, 30 years, they're going to be the ones leading this country, okay? So if they grow up in the public education system, okay, if their teachers think the assassination of their political opponents is okay, if they're taught that the First Amendment doesn't matter, and then they go to college, and that further is reinforced in their minds, that they are told that they are evil and guilty for being a certain skin color, if they're told that they're oppressed, if they're told that they're victims and that the system's out to get them and capitalism is evil, okay, they're going to take that into their adult lives. So when they're 30, 40 years old, what's going to happen? Who's going to be the ones leading America? It's going to be these kids. They're going to grow up someday. So this is why this is so important. And if you need further convincing the public school system isn't serving your kids, just look at nationwide test scores, right? There are kids, they're young adults now, but there are teenagers who are graduating from high school having never read a single book. They're reading excerpts. They're reading like paragraphs. They're reading out of context. They don't even know basic critical skills like reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, they're relying on ChatGPT for everything. They're not reading, and math scores have absolutely tanked. So whatever return on investment you think you are getting from the public school system, you're not. So even if you're not persuaded by the ideological argument and the need to train your children with good American values and the values you want to see in this country in the coming decades, just look at the quality of the education they're getting. Okay, it's not good. It's not good at all. Like, American students are falling behind, and if your kid is in a school where they're not reading books cover to cover, and they're not learning how to analyze those books, and they're not being challenged, and they're being told what to think, not how to think, that's clearly a problem. So I think it's up to parents, to pull your kids out of the public school system. And people, I think, would be opposed to this because obviously there's costs involved. Like, private school, of course, is incredibly expensive. I understand that. Homeschooling has gained a lot of traction, and it's really not as expensive as people make it out to be. There's a lot of options. If you are in a job where you can go part-time or you can do flex time, and you can teach your kids for part-time and join a homeschool pod, and other parents can teach. Like, there's creative ways to do this, right? Like, you don't just have to 100% send your kids to private school or 100% homeschool your kids. Like, it has grown with such force over the last 5 years that there are options now that didn't exist before. So I would recommend really thinking about this and really contemplating it, especially if you are appalled by where we are in society and you are concerned for the future. The kids are the future. So I would say, make sure they have the right moral framework to ensure that America has a strong future. Otherwise, it's going to be lost. Okay, so next, I would say let businesses know what a civil society tolerates. And this goes back to kind of what I was saying before with how we are now in a permissive environment where people who work at certain businesses are allowed to say, no, we're not going to serve you. So FEMA told the folks in Western North Carolina, okay, you're not going to get benefits for the hurricane because you're a Trump person. That this was a video that went viral, again, of the Office Depot worker who said, no, we're not going to print this. It is propaganda. So I think we've seen at this point that boycotts do work. So the Dylan Mulvaney campaign against Bud Light and the reaction to that has clearly shown that boycotts work. Most recently, the outrage over Cracker Barrel's rebrand has shown that you can get a company to reverse course that way. I think we need to keep putting pressure on businesses. So I'm not just talking about, businesses that are like Office Depot, for example, that had a negative response to Charlie Kirk assassination. I'm saying all businesses that are supporting and promoting leftist ideology. So if there's a business with a massive DI footprint within their company, like, boycott them, stop supporting them, stop giving them your money. If there is a business that is a sponsor of influencers and media personalities who are promoting this kind of toxic rhetoric and anti-American values, boycott them. Stop giving them your money. There are a ton of alternatives. It's just that a lot of the alternatives in our market don't have the marketing dollars to spend to get your attention, right? A lot of people, for example, might go to Starbucks over a local coffee shop because Starbucks is more well-known, has a bigger nationwide footprint. There's the app. It's just easier, right? There's less friction. But just because it's easier, it doesn't mean it's the best option, okay? So if you want to neutralize leftist ideology, the key is to stop funding it. So if dollars start flowing, if revenue starts falling in response to the behavior of some of these companies who are employing leftists, who are implementing leftist policies within their companies, who are supporting people who are putting forward leftist ideologies through their media platforms, if you stop supporting them with your dollars and the revenue dries up, they will change course very fast. And we've already seen this, you know, what was it, like less than 2 years? Target went from being a tuck friendly store to really not caring this past year about pride or anything like that, right? So we've seen responses based on how people spend money at these stores. So I think it's really important to start boycotting actively, like vote with your wallet. The next thing you can do is start a business. And I think this is really important because we're not just in this political culture and this political climate right now, we're also in a massive economic transformation. So AI is going to take a lot of jobs, okay? Like, you might not have a job in the next 5 years. I might not be able to keep doing this in the next 5 years, okay? That's just the reality of where it's at. So I think for people who can, the time is now to start a business. And when I say start a business, I'm not talking about a startup. I'm not talking about a SaaS product no one needs and no one wants. And I'm not saying start a private equity run franchise either. I'm saying if you're a woodworker and you've been doing like carpentry for the last however many years, like start your own business, okay? If you love baking, start a bakery. This is something I'm going to start doing soon, is like just doing like a cottage bakery, because I love baking and I think it'd be really fun and a great way for me to, you know, live my values, and just do something that's offline and gets me connected to the community, okay? So start a business. And the reason why I think this is important is because the people who are most affected by job losses are going to be Gen Zers. These are people in entry-level positions. They just have nothing of value to offer the economy at this point. Just, I'm not saying that they're not important. It's just from an economic perspective, they're basically on par with where AI agents are right now. So from a cost benefit and analysis, employers are looking at the difference. They're like, well, why would I hire a 22-year-old fresh out of college who has no experience when I can, you know, hire and train or license and train an AI agent? So that's what they're doing. And so because these people don't have economic opportunities, they're the ones who are going to be most persuaded by leftist ideology. They're the ones who are going to find it most appealing because they have the most to gain from it. So you need to get, we collectively, society, need to give these people, give young people in particular, something to hope for. We need to give them a future that they can work towards. And I think that starts by giving them employment opportunities. And so when you do that, when you give them an employment opportunity, when you give them an opportunity to be mentored, when you give them something to work towards, and they're not just a number at a company, they're not just, you know, they don't feel hopeless, they have something that they can work towards, I think that is going to foster better relationships within the community, but it's going to tone down some of the political rhetoric, right? A lot of what's happening right now, just young people are angsty, and for good reason, right? They see the writing on the wall and they're like, well, okay, well, what do I do? So give them something to live for. Give them something to work for. And so if you're, you know, Gen X, Boomer, whatever, you're sitting on a pile of cash, you have a skill, you want to give back, like, do something. Like start a company, do something. Give these people the opportunity to work. And you know, and the ones who want to will show up. And obviously the ones who don't won't. And you know, that's neither here nor there, but we need to create opportunities for young people. We need to give them equity in this country so they want to further American values and they want to live in this country in the future. Okay, next, meet your neighbors. I think a lot of us, especially post-COVID, have felt really isolated and atomized because COVID enforced social distancing, and I don't think we ever moved away from that. We've just felt like, oh my gosh, okay, like I can't, you know, this person might have COVID, this person might be dangerous, you know, for a variety of reasons, we've just stopped interacting with our neighbors. And I think we need to get back to talking with our neighbors and hanging out with them and know who they are. And then there's a logical reason for this, right? Like, the more your community is stable, your neighborhood, the town you live in, the city you live in, the more it's stable, the more it's going to prosper, right? The more neighbors are looking out for one another, the less you have to rely on the police. You know, everyone talks about police brutality. They talk about police violence. Well, one of the reasons why this is happening is because there's disproportionate levels of crime in certain communities in this country, and those communities have an ethos not to snitch on each other, not to get involved, not to make yourself a victim. Okay, so if those communities looked out for one another, they took care of one another, they cared about their fellow American, then yeah, they would show up and they would be the enforcement at the local level, and you wouldn't need to call the police every single time someone does something wrong. You would have accountability in a way you don't now. And a great illustration of this is Irina Zaritska's murder. I mean, she sat on the wrong part of that train. You had her surrounded by six black people, and they all stared and looked at her. There was a woman right next to her who just, Irina in her dying moments, turned and looked at her, pleading, like, help me. And the woman just looked at her, did absolutely nothing, got up and walked away. Okay. And so this is why there's so much like problems with crime in certain communities in this country. It's because the people living in those communities don't care. They don't care about their neighbor. They don't care about their family. They don't care about one another. They just don't care. And so those values have permutated into the rest of society. So now we're highly atomized and we just don't care. And I think if we get back to a place where neighbors actually know each other and care, like, stuff like that isn't going to happen. Violence isn't going to happen because you have eyes and ears all throughout your street. And this is, I mean, just think about, the 50s and 60s. And my dad tells me these stories all the time, right? Like he would run around the neighborhood, and the neighbor 3 doors down would see him doing something and would call his mom and tell his mom, so that when he got home, he got reprimanded, right? Like, that used to be American culture. And so you didn't need to have the police showing up all the time because you had parents, you had neighbors, you had other people who were looking out for the kids in the neighborhood, and if they were getting in trouble, holding them accountable. Well, we've removed that. We've substituted it with police. So no wonder why police brutality has gone up, because you're increasing the number of times police have to engage with certain communities of people. And because of the distrust between those communities of people and the police, it's hostile, it's aggressive, and it naturally becomes violent. So if you want to make the country a safer place, if you want to make it a more stable place, get to know your neighbors. Okay, this guy, I'll link this article in the description, but you can watch this guy, he wanted to have a party. So he's an 87-year-old man who went around his neighborhood and he invited people to come to his party. So I think more people need to be like him. The next, kind of similar, is volunteering, right? It's another way to get involved with people in your community who you might share hobbies with, but who you might disagree with politically, who you might not share the same religion, you might not be from the same racial background or ethnic background. Like, it's a way to give back. It's a way, if you're older, to mentor someone younger than you. It's a way to help people who are in need instead of just relying on the government to do it. It's a way to build a hobby and do something, and it costs nothing. It just costs your time. So I think volunteering is something everyone can do. It doesn't take that much time. Just take some of the time you're spending scrolling on social media and reallocate it towards volunteering. Speaking of social media, I think people need to delete social media. I've done a separate video on Cal Newport and a recent essay he made arguing for people to delete social media. I'll link that in the description as well. I think this is important. Social media has been a net negative on society. I've seen some criticism. It's like, well, it depends on how you use it, or if you're, of course you'll have this negative view if you're not using it the right way. Yeah, that's true, but also, like, these apps have been designed to hijack our attention. Like, the people who built Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all these apps, they studied casino behavior. They went to, like, there is a behavioral analysis lab at Stanford where these people were all working, or people at their companies were part of. They went to Las Vegas. They studied slot machines. They studied human behavior, and they made it into a science. Okay, so yeah, it is how you use them. True. But it's also, like, recognizing how toxic these social media platforms are and what the core purpose of it. It's not to connect you and I. It's not to help you grow your business, okay? Like, that can be a byproduct of it, but that's not the goal, okay? The goal of this is to create user-generated content that can be leveraged to embed advertising in between it, and to create an environment that maximizes the amount of attention you use on these apps in order to maximize the return on ad spend for advertisers. So it's all about advertising. It's creating a media ecosystem where advertisers can make the most bang for their buck. Okay. And so that's what this is all about. So if you want to stop participating in the toxicity that's happening in our political discourse right now, I think deleting social media is a good start. And I understand like people need to use it for a variety of reasons. I'm one of these people. But I think there's protocols you can put into place, right? So like I don't have social media apps on my phone. I don't use them on my phone. Okay, that's the first most important thing is if you want to stay on social media, fine, but use it on your desktop. Don't use it on your phone. Or if you have to use it for your business, put a layer between you and the app. So use a scheduling platform to engage with your audience and post content. You hire an assistant or a virtual assistant to help you. But get yourself off the apps, and I think we would all be better for it. Next, I would recommend starting to read more instead of scrolling. Most of us are spending about 2.5 hours per day on social media. Again, it's passive, and these apps, like I said, they're there to harvest advertising revenue, right? They're there to maximize our advertising revenue, and they're doing it by harvesting your attention. And so they've created these infinite scrolls where you just scroll through and you don't even know what you're seeing, but the content that gets the most engagement is the most inflammatory. So that's why you're seeing increased calls for political violence. That's why you're seeing extremism. That's why you're seeing polarization, because that's what makes the most money for these platforms and for advertisers. So this is why engaging with your local community is important. This is why, getting to know your neighbors, starting a business, volunteering is important, because you need to unplug. You need to find ways to unplug from social media and reground yourself in the real world, not the digital world, because the digital world has a bias towards the extremes. But then also getting news and information from primary sources rather than relying on what someone says on TikTok or Twitter. And this is important because you might not recognize this, but there is a filter. There's a filtering mechanism when you rely on the media or you rely on someone else. I'm biased, right? Like I'm sharing my thoughts with you, but if I read a news article and I analyze it for you, like you're getting my bias, right? Like you need to read it for yourself and come to your own conclusions. But what happens with the news and how it exists today is that it's not actually news, right? It's whatever the editorial boards at different publications or different media outlets choose to publish. That is the news. And then the individuals writing those stories or producing those videos or podcasts or whatever, it's what they want, right? And so if you have a group of people who's come from the same 2 or 3 journalist schools, and it's a small network of journalists, and they all know each other, and they come from this, expert class, and they see themselves as above you, that you and I are incapable of thinking for ourselves, so they feel it's their moral responsibility to tell you and I how to think, they're going to start doing that. And they've already been doing that. And you can clearly see that. And so that's why I think it's important to read or engage with primary source material. And so Charlie Kirk's assassination is a great example. You have all these people who have come out and they've said he's evil, he's a racist, he's a bigot. Okay, how much of his content have these people actually consumed? AOC stood on the House floor and called him a racist. And she has probably never watched a single minute of footage over the decade plus he's spent going to college campuses. He's got hundreds of thousands of hours of video on the internet. Anyone can go watch it. You can come to the conclusions for yourself. But how many people have actually taken the time to watch what he did and watch what he had to say? Not very many. They're relying on other people to filter information to them. And if you've ever played the game of telephone, you know what starts as the piece of information goes through the telephone line and ends up not being the same once you're done. So you have to go to the primary source material. And I think the best way to do that is reading, because reading fosters critical thinking, and it gives you a context. It gives you a way to think about things. It's hard to do that in our soundbite culture of TikToks and reels and short form video. Like you need to watch things in their entirety. You need to listen to the entire hour plus long keynote, not the 30-second soundbite. You need to read the whole book, not just a couple sentences here and there. I think it's really important. So reallocate your scrolling time to engaging with primary source material. Another thing, and this is kind of going to go into religious territory, but you can take it with a grain of salt, whatever you want to do. But I think we need to honor the Sabbath, and if you want to go religious and do it biblically, that's up to you. But you don't have to just be biblical. You can have a digital Sabbath, a digital rest day, a day where you don't use devices, you don't work, You don't engage online. You're not scrolling. You're completely 100% present and available for you and your family. This is something Charlie Kirk did. He is posthumously publishing a book. This was scheduled to come out in December. I've already ordered it, and so if you want to order it, you can. But how to honor the Sabbath as a way to rest and unplug and disengage, I think this is a good philosophy, and it's really important. The next thing I'm going to recommend is to start dressing like you want to impress people, like how like you want to be respected. I think we live in a culture where people dress like slobs and they dress like sluts, and we need to nip that in the bud. You go back just a few decades from, past our grandparents' generation. I mean, everyone dressed up nice. Everyone, you went out in public, and if you didn't dress in a certain way and with the culture, you were looked down upon. And that has radically changed over the past few years. I go to the grocery store and you have people literally wearing their pajamas. People, and there was a woman, gosh, maybe like a month or two ago, who was kicked off, I think, a Delta flight. She was wearing her bathrobe. Like, she wasn't dressed, so they kicked her off the flight because she was wearing a bathrobe. I've seen people with, their shower caps on going to the grocery store. You go to the gym, and this is a huge problem. You got girls who are dressed in nothing. Their athletic wear is so tight that they might as well be wearing nothing at all. And then they complain when guys pay attention to them and people stare at them and they get catcalled. It's like, hello, like, you're advertising you want attention. So either you advertise that you want attention, you accept the attention, or you stop advertising that you want the attention. Like, it's that simple. So I think we need to create a culture that is built on respect. And to do that, you have to start respecting yourself. And that means taking pride in the way you look, taking pride in your presentation. And it's true. Like, if you had two people and one was wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt with holes and another was wearing a three-piece suit, who are you going to gravitate towards? The person in the three-piece suit, okay? Doesn't matter if it's an educator, if it's someone who you want to do a business deal with, or just some random person on the sidewalk. You're going to be repelled by the person that looks like a slob, and you're going to be attracted to the person who dresses nicely. So we need to make our culture more respectable, and I think that's a great way to do it. You don't need to dress up all the time every day, but just like take some pride in your appearance and set yourself apart, right? There's part of the culture of leftist ideology has been to be repellent. There's a whole man repellent element to it. There's women out there who are trying to degrade their bodies so much that they repel men. So to counteract that, to stand out, go against the grain, to show that you are different and that you have different standards and different values, you can do that easily through the way you dress. I think that's a really good way to signal, I believe this, I'm different, this is what's important to me. So related to that, eating well and exercising kind of goes with the same thing. Like, you need to respect yourself. You need to show others that you respect yourself. Like, there's been this huge push within leftist ideology to deny biology, and I think that has most explicitly been manifested through the transgender debate, but also manifests in obesity. You have an entire cohort of people within leftist ideology who think obesity is healthy and it should be celebrated, and it's become glorified, and that is not the case at all. We need to accept biology, and if you are morbidly obese, you are sick, you are ill, okay? That's not something to celebrate. And so I think the way we do that is by living by example. Like, you don't need to call someone a name. You don't need to be mean to them per se, but you can be the example. You can be the example they want to live for, and make the example something to aspire to, right? I think that's really important. Again, this is something that I think within your local community you can do. Be the person who dresses well, who's respectable, who's a leader in the community, participates in local politics, has a business, or is, in other ways volunteering, mentoring kids, and you see it and takes care of their body, eats healthy. Like, this is a lifestyle, right? This is a lifestyle that is inherently American, and I think the more of the stuff that we practice, the more that American values will be able to be transmitted within the culture. Another thing, I'd recommend is going back to church. And if you don't follow Christianity, fine, go back to your, whatever religious faith you are part of. But I think as Americans, we need to go back to church. And that is in part because we have lost our objective morality. The leftist ideology is trying to replace, fill the void of Christianity and fill it with a new ideology that is secular and subjective. So it's based on nothing. It's rooted in nothing. It's whatever you interpret, whatever you believe, and that is a really dangerous place to be because anyone can create their own rules, their own role in society, do whatever they want, and they're not held accountable to anyone. And this is the problem we're seeing right now, right? You have so many people who they don't think they have a role, they don't think they have a responsibility to anyone else, and they can just do whatever they want, and whatever their value system, their made up value system that's very internal and egocentric, like that's what they live based off of. And that's not how you function as a civil society. You need to have an objective moral truth that everyone agrees upon. Everyone needs to agree, okay, murder is wrong, killing is wrong, there are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so I think church solves that problem. I think Christianity solves that problem. And then of course, like, church provides community, right? Like, so if you're trying to engage and if you don't want to be socially isolated, if you want to participate in your local community, I mean, a church is a natural infrastructure to do that. It has a lot of, social benefits to it as well. And for me personally, I think having grown up in the church is one of the reasons why I was able to say, hey, leftist ideology, this is wrong, because I had this internal gut feeling for a number of different things, right? And I changed over time, but I had this internal like gut feeling, like something's wrong about this doesn't feel right, I can't accept this is not okay. And because I was able to tune in to that internal feeling, I was able to not agree to the terms of leftist ideology, and I was able to remove myself from it. Had I not been brought up in that moral framework and known certain things to be true, it's hard to say where I would be. I'd probably be like every other feminist out there. Another thing, join clubs and online communities. We have replaced human interaction with these online communities that are based on identities, and identities are not communities, right? Like, I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian since I was 4. I do not identify with a vegetarian community. I don't care what you eat. I don't care how you spend your money at the grocery store. I just don't like meat, okay? So I don't eat it. But that's not my community. I don't identify with that community. It's just how I eat. And so I think we've seen a proliferation of these imagined communities on the internet, and then everyone thinks that you are a member of the same community based on identifiers, so your sexual orientation, your skin color, in some cases your dietary preferences. I mean, the vegan community is pretty robust and active. All these different like identities have inorganically bound people together, but in reality they're not community, right? There's no accountability within those communities. There's only adherence to the dogma and the doctrine. So when the dogma changes, when the doctrine changes, well, then you either have to accept it or you have to leave. And that's what we've seen with the Democratic Party over the past couple of years. It's like, either you accept transism, either you accept DEI, you have to accept anti-white racism, you have to accept social justice reform as we define it, or you're out. And it's been a purity test over and over again, and that's what you're seeing. And so you need to find something to participate in. Again, ground yourself in a local community, be present where you are. So obviously church, I said, is a good example. You could do fitness-oriented clubs, so like a running club or a pickleball club, join a book club, just like do something, be part of your community. All right, I'm almost done here, guys. Thanks for sticking with me thus far. The next thing, build things, right? We live in this hyper-connected world where our lives are nothing but pixels. And this is true for me, right? If there was a solar flare tomorrow, the internet went down, I would lose 90% of my life's work, right? It's all digital. It's all online. It's content like this. It's essays. Like, that is my life's work. And so if we were plunged into a digital dark age, I would lose everything, right? I would have nothing. And so this is what most of us have to show for our lives. We work in these jobs. Most of these jobs are bullshit. We don't actually have anything to show for them. And then what we do have to show for our lives, it's all digital. It's social media content. It's engagement online. It's digital communities, right? Like, we're not doing anything in the real world. And so I think to get back to reality, we have to start building things and creating things and doing things. And I think this is beneficial for myriad reasons. puts a buffer between you and the AI world we're heading in, but it also can help de-escalate some of the political stuff we're seeing right now. If you love to bake bread and then you go give out loaves to bread to your neighbors, right? Like you're doing something with your hands, you're doing an act of kindness, you're meeting your neighbors. It's all like these are all integrated values and recommendations I'm saying here. These aren't just like necessarily one-off things. I think they're part of a broader, you know, I think way of life that we need to get back to if we want to neutralize extremist political ideology. And so I think, you know, building something, getting involved with your hands, joining a club, you know, if you're older, working with kids. So if you're a woodworker, go volunteer at a school and a shop class and teach kids how to do this stuff. I think that's really important. All right. The last thing, this is my final point. I think we should all aspire to become anonymous nobodies. I think we're obsessed with becoming somebody. And I know I felt this personally, and I don't know if it's a generational thing. I don't know if it's because of technology, but you know, over the last decade and a half, I think hustle culture really gripped me, and I felt compelled, like I had to be the next Elon Musk, I had to be the next Jeff Bezos. Like this, it's like if you didn't work on your side hustle from 5 to 9 after 9 to 5, like you were weak, you weren't working hard enough. And I think this would create like a toxic environment where everyone internalized, well, not everyone, but you know, at least, you know, from a millennial perspective, you know, people like me internalize the need to aggressively become somebody. And you see it now. You see like the Forbes 30 under 30 and people aspiring to be that. You see you see all these made up, you know, tech startup CEOs who don't really have a business. They don't actually have a company. They have an idea, a couple lines of code, maybe some funding, and all of a sudden they're like this big deal. We just live in a culture that privileges status and ego, and I think we need to get back to accepting that none of us are going to be the next Jeff Bezos. None of us are going to be the next Elon Musk. And that's okay. It's okay to just be a wife and a mother. It's okay to just be a writer. It's okay to not have, you know, a fancy title or work at a big tech company. Like, it's okay to be nobody. It's okay to go to Trader Joe's and no one knows who you are. I think so many, especially young people, you know, they see influencers on social media and they aspire to be able to live lives like them. They want that, right? They want the celebrity, they want the prestige, they want the attention, they want the fame, and they don't understand what comes with it. And a lot of times it's not necessarily a good thing, right? Taylor Swift can never go grocery shopping on her own. Like, think about that. She never, not in the last decade, not for the rest of her life, will ever be able to go out and just go do what I'm doing right now. I'm sitting at a coffee shop and just be herself. Like, she will, as long as you're a public figure, like you never have the privacy and the anonymity, you know, that I think a lot of us take for granted. Um, you know, and like so my goal, you know, I obviously am creating content here on YouTube. You know, on the one hand, my goal isn't to become anybody. I do this because I've been encouraged to do it because lots of people throughout my life have told me, you know, I have interesting things to say. You guys listen, you think I have interesting things to say. So I think it's my duty and responsibility to share these thoughts and these perspectives with other people so I can give you something to think about, make you question something. So it's more of a maybe teaching and sharing, peer teaching, sharing component to it. So that's part of it. I love to learn. And so this is a way for me to find remuneration from learning, because otherwise, you know, I'd just be sitting around all day learning, and you know, the reality is we live in an economy, so I have to make money somehow. So, you know, it's a way for me to do that, to get paid to learn. But then also, like, one of my dreams for the future is to own my own coffee shop and my own like coffee shop bookstore workspace, and be able to have the in-person conversations, the salon-style debates, if you're familiar with salons during, you know, the French Revolution and on into the 19th century Europe. Like, have discourse, have dialogue, like have conversations with people, discuss things, debate things. Like, I love that. I love that, and I think that's like missing in our culture. So that's why like Charlie Kirk's assassination definitely hit me hard too, because I love debating people and having conversations with people. And now the signal is, okay, if you do this, you could die. Which kind of sucks, right? Like, no one wants to be in that place. And so yeah, like my dream is to use what I'm building, writing, creating content, commentary, all that kind of stuff. And eventually that would lead to me being able to open up my own coffee shop, bookstore space to have conversations and dialogue, and an environment that is pro education and pro critical thinking, and people could come in and read, John Locke and have a conversation about it, or people could read the Constitution and debate it. That's one of my bigger dreams, right? And so this is a way where I can make that happen. But it's not like I'm not here like give me all the likes and the clicks. Like I just don't care. I don't care. You reach a point where you recognize like that's not what's important in life. And so I think we need to get back to that. And I think for those of us who are older and remember life before social media, this is something we have to instill in young people because they don't remember this life, right? They only know how to be rewarded on social media, and that's their world. So again, this is why all of these things I've said are important because the more you and I are present in the lives of people who are currently gripped by leftist ideology, the more opportunities they will have to question that ideology. If you and I are a presence in their lives, whether that's through volunteering, mentoring, employing them, being neighbors, whatever, the more you are a presence, the more you are an alternative to the ideology that they are beholden by, the more chances you will have to lift them out of that ideology, to get them away from it. And I think that's really important, is that we need to create the in-person spaces, the real-time spaces, the engagements with real people to make that happen, to make it possible for people to leave. Otherwise, you're just going to have disgruntled young people in particular who are just scrolling online. They're in Reddit subthreads or subreddits. They're in Discord servers. They're just like getting angsty. They're on social media, so they're seeing increased numbers of content that pushes them more and more to the extremes. And then it just, it doesn't solve the problem. And so I think this is why this is important, and where you and I come in, is we have to lead by example. So we have to do these things to create the example for younger people to live by. And I think that's Charlie Kirk's legacy. That's what he did. He lived by example. You can watch all sorts of different videos on YouTube of people who knew him personally or people who didn't, who felt inspired by him, who were called back to church because of him, who left their ideological beliefs because of him, who started their own content creation and their own channels and their own platforms where they could share their values and their thoughts because of him. So he led by example, and I think that's what we need to do as well. My goal is to share some ideas. These are ideas I came up with as I'm trying to process what happened and figure out where do we go from here? I don't know that we can stop conflict. I don't know that we can avoid a civil war. I don't know if we can avoid balkanization of the United States. I don't know that we can avoid that, but I think we can perpetuate the American way of life, and it might look different than what it does now, but I think we can perpetuate it. And I think when I think of America, this is some of the stuff I think of. And so these are things we need to do to preserve that, right? Because if we're not doing the things, what are we preserving? If we're just sitting and scrolling and letting ourselves get angry, we're not really being the change makers we seek, and we're not really solving any problems. So I'm hopeful that this is maybe helpful. Maybe there's some ideas on here that you found value in. But yeah, I want us to I want the United States to be successful. I love this country. I love it with all my heart, and I don't want to see it die out because we weren't living our values. I think now is the time to start living our values, and not just challenging people on what they believe, but walking the walk and showing them that there's a different way of life. And I think that's really important. So that's what I got for you today. If you found value in this at all, I would love it if you would like and subscribe. And if you have any thoughts or comments to share, I would love to see those as well. Definitely keep it civil, though. Don't need to encourage any more vitriol in the digital world. But definitely, if you have thoughts to add, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next video.